They say family is everything. That blood is thicker than water. That no matter how bad it gets, you always show up for the people who raised you, who shared your first birthdays, who knew you before you knew yourself. And for most of my life I believed that. I didn't just believe it, I lived it. I was the dependable one, the fixer, the silent support beam of a house built on cracked foundations. But that belief was shattered the night of my father's 70th birthday dinner. The night my sister looked at me with that smug, polished smile and said, "Sorry, this table's for family only." Let me rewind. I'm Emily, 35 years old, marketing consultant, recovering people pleaser. For most of my life, my family taught me how to disappear in plain sight. I was the middle child, wedged between Vanessa, the golden firstborn, and Logan, the surprise late-in-life baby who stole what little spotlight was left. Vanessa was the one with the magnetic charm, the one whose science fair volcanoes exploded on cue, whose ballet recitals brought my mother to tears. Logan was the miracle baby, the second wind of joy for parents who thought their parenting years were behind them. Me. I was the utility, the extra set of hands, the afterthought with good grades and good behavior. I was seen only when needed. I grew up in a house where emotions were only valid if they were convenient. Crying was drama. Anger was disrespect. Silence was golden, and I wore it like a second skin. I became the girl who didn't complain when her birthday dinner got postponed because Vanessa had a fencing competition. The girl who did chores without being asked, who drove her brother to school, who smiled through the family photos where her name was always the one mispronounced by relatives. I learned early that love in our house was earned, and even then, it came with conditions. Still I stayed loyal. I showed up, paid attention. I remembered anniversaries, hosted Christmas when my mom got tired of it, and Venmo'd Logan money for textbooks he never thanked me for. It wasn't that I expected anything grand in return. I just wanted to feel seen, to be part of something, to belong. So when I got the call about Dad's 70th birthday dinner, I didn't hesitate. Mom called me on a Wednesday afternoon while I was between client calls. Her voice was syrupy, the kind she used when there was an ask buried beneath the pleasantries. "Emily, sweetheart," she said, "we're doing something special for your father's birthday. A big family dinner at that new place he likes. The one with the rooftop view. Rose Terrace." I already knew what was coming. "We were hoping you could help us out with the reservation. You're so good at these things. Just put down the deposit. We'll sort the rest later." "Sure," I said without thinking. Like always, I booked the space that evening. Private room. Panoramic city view. 15 guests. Set menu, premium drinks package. Customized dessert tray with "Happy 70th, Dad" in chocolate drizzle. Total deposit $1,200. I paid it without blinking. And I didn't expect anyone to thank me. I just assumed, foolishly, that I was part of the picture. That this dinner included me not just as an organizer but as a participant. Someone who belonged. The night of the dinner, I arrived early. As usual, I wore a black velvet dress with soft sleeves that fell just above my elbows. I carried a navy blue gift bag with a framed photo of me and Dad from when I was 8. One of the few moments caught on camera where he looked at me like I was the center of his world. The restaurant was beautiful. Floor-to-ceiling windows, the skyline twinkling beyond them. A baby grand piano hummed in the background. The hostess greeted me by name and led me upstairs. When I stepped into the private room, my breath caught. The table was long, elegant, glowing with golden candlelight. Each place setting had a name card in cursive font. Crystal glasses sparkled. A bottle of champagne was already chilling in a silver bucket. And there, at the head of the table, sat Vanessa, resplendent in emerald green, laughing with a wine glass in hand. She spotted me instantly. Her smile flicked up like a blade. "Emily," she called. "Glad you made it." Heads turned. Some smiled. Most didn't. I stepped forward, gift in hand, ready to slide into the empty seat 2 places down from Dad. But before I could reach it, Vanessa stood, tilted her head with exaggerated sympathy, and said, "Oh, sorry. That table's for family only. We set you up just over there." She pointed toward a small round table near the coat rack. One chair. No place card. Not even a bread plate. Froze. I waited for someone, mom, dad, anyone, to say something. To laugh and say it was a mistake. To wave me over and scoot a chair beside them. But no one did. Mom offered a tight smile. Dad looked down at his hands. Logan gave a half shrug and went back to his phone. The room carried on. I walked to the side table like a ghost. I didn't take off my coat. The waiter came by with a glass of water. No menu. No welcome. And for the next 2 hours, I sat there watching my family celebrate a man I helped raise, at a dinner I paid for, in a room I wasn't invited to be part of. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was when the bill came. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was regretting anything, but because my body, used to absorbing pain in silence, didn't quite know how to process the shift. For 32 years, I had trained myself to suppress the sting. To rewrite rejection into maybe they forgot, or maybe they didn't mean it like that. But this time, there was no alternate narrative to soften the blow. I was told directly with a smirk and a wine glass raised like a trophy. Family only. And I believed them. I believed them not because it was true, but because their version of family had always excluded accountability. It had always meant who could perform the loudest love, the glossiest charm, and the best table speeches. Me. I was none of those things. I was useful. I was the emergency contact no one saved under favorites. My kitchen smelled like burnt toast. Not because I had forgotten the timer, but because my hands were shaking too hard to butter the bread before sliding it in. My inbox pinged again. This time from Aunt Karen, whose name always sounded like a warning. Subject, concerned. Emily, sweetheart. I'm not sure what happened last night, but I hope you'll reconsider your tone. Your sister was only joking. You know how Vanessa is. Scoff. Yes, I knew exactly how Vanessa was. She was the kind of person who dressed cruelty in cashmere and called it just being honest. Who weaponized your silence as consent, and your voice as aggression. Who would gift $1,000 purse to mom on Mother's Day, but forget her birthday the next year, because memory only mattered when it could be monetized. That afternoon, I sat with my laptop, receipts sprawled across my desktop like confetti from a party I was never truly invited to. Florist invoice, $350. Town car, $120. Dad's custom-framed gift, $180. Deposit for the private room at Rose Ember, $1,000. $1,000. For a seat next to the trash can. When I hit send on that email to the family group thread, I didn't tremble. I didn't rehearse. I didn't reread it 100 times like I usually did when I wanted to be understood without upsetting anyone. This time I didn't need to be understood. I needed to be done. And what followed was silence. But not the kind I'd grown up with. The subtle hush of being overlooked. This silence was heavier. Carried weight. It told stories without ever raising its voice. Another ping. This time from Madison. Vanessa's ex. Madison. Emily, that email? It's circulating. Quietly, but people are talking. Not just about what happened, but about you. And honestly, it's about time. Me, about time for what? Madison. About time someone stopped feeding a family that only visits when they're hungry. Her words hit like glass. Sharp but clean. I thought about all the years I had fed that family. Not just with money, but with emotional leftovers I never had enough of for myself. Birthday gifts. Emergency deposits. Middle of the night calls from mom about just needing a quick loan. Vanessa's business logo I designed for free twice. Dad's dental copay last December. I had fed them from a plate I wasn't even allowed to sit near. It wasn't a hard decision, once I allowed myself to admit that the joint emergency account wasn't a safety net. It was a leash. I logged into my bank, selected transfer full balance, and watched the digits move from shared control to personal clarity. $28,741.88. Gone from shared hands. Safe in mine. I named the new folder in my app, Table Fund. Because next time I wouldn't be asking for a chair. Growing up, I thought being easy made me lovable. So I became the one who never argued, never pushed back, who did chores without being asked, made everyone's tea, remembered birthdays, and never expected mine to be celebrated in return. I made myself small to fit the space they gave me, and even then I spilled over. So I shrank further. Didn't cry when they joked about my haircut. Didn't flinch when they forgot to mention my promotion. Didn't react when they accidentally scheduled family events on weekends I couldn't make it. I thought if I became lighter, smaller, quieter, they'd make space. Instead, they learned to ignore me completely. Until they needed something. I hope you're proud of yourself. You ruined Dad's birthday. And now everyone thinks you're some kind of victim. You always twist everything to be about you. Maybe if you weren't so cold, people would actually want you at the table. Played it twice. Not to internalize it, but to hear the sound of someone spiraling when they lose control over someone they thought was programmable. 3 weeks after the dinner, I booked my first therapy session. Not because I was breaking, but because I was finally safe enough to be honest. I'm not angry, I told her. I'm just exhausted from waiting to be seen. She nodded slowly. And what would being seen look like? Pause. It would look like not being the one who always gives the extra chair. I typed slowly, letting the keys carry power I had been too afraid to claim for years. Rule 1. No one who makes me feel invisible gets to eat first. Rule 2. I don't finance comfort for those who demand my silence. Rule 3. Boundaries are not punishments. They're self-respect with structure. Rule 4. I don't sit near trash anymore. I recycle people now. I didn't cry. I didn't perform closure for anyone's comfort. I just sat, laptop glowing like a quiet revolution, and let myself be proud of a script that was no longer being co-written by guilt. The weekend came and went in a haze of overdue peace. There was no ping from the family group chat. No forwarded, "Good morning, son," meme from Aunt Karen. No, "Anyone up for dinner tonight?" from Mom. No guilt-laced passive aggression disguised as care. And for the first time in my life, I didn't rush to fill it. I let it echo. I let it stretch. I let it breathe. Because silence, when chosen, becomes a boundary. When imposed, it becomes erasure. And I had lived too long on the wrong side of that line. That Sunday, I found myself staring into my bathroom mirror longer than usual. Not checking for flaws. Not measuring my worth against Vanessa's flawless Instagram highlight reel. Just looking. For the first time I could really see myself. The soft lines forming from years of suppressing rage. The curve of my shoulders, finally beginning to straighten. The faint crease on my lip from biting it every time someone crossed the line and I swallowed my reaction whole. This face had endured things no one apologized for. This body had hosted birthdays no one attended. Funerals no one asked about, surgeries no one checked in on. And still I had smiled. "Dad, can we talk? Just us, please." I didn't answer right away. Not because I wanted to punish him, but because I needed to think. Had he ever asked to talk to me, just me, without it being a transaction? Was it ever not about helping Vanessa? Or explaining Mom's behavior? I gave it a few hours. Made coffee. Took a walk. Wrote in my journal. Then I replied. "Emily, sure. Tomorrow. Noon. Call me." He replied with a thumbs up emoji. The first time he ever confirmed anything without a follow-up reminder from Mom. Maybe he meant it this time. I answered after the second ring. "Hey, Dad." He sounded tired. Older. Like he'd aged in the past week more than in the past decade. "Hi, Em. Thanks for picking up." Waited. "I got your email. I read it 3 times. I stayed silent. Your sister's been losing her mind, by the way. Vanessa's calling everyone, saying you overreacted. That it was all a misunderstanding." I nearly laughed, but didn't. "But the thing is," he continued, "she's always done that. And you've always been the one who cleaned up." Now I said something. "Yes. And that's over." "I know," he said. "And I think I think I let your mom set the tone too often. I followed her lead, and her lead was always Vanessa first. I leaned against my counter, waiting. I'm sorry, he said finally. I didn't see it. Or maybe I didn't want to. Why now? Yes. He paused. Because you finally walked out. And no one knew what to do when you didn't come back. I didn't just walk out of dinner, Dad. I walked out of decades of being tolerated. Another pause. I know. And I deserved that. We sat in silence for a moment. Not the painful kind, but the honest kind. Then he said, "Can I send you the money for your half of the dinner? Or at least pay you back for the deposit?" I smiled, not because I needed the money, but because this was the first time he acknowledged that I paid at all. "Keep it," I said. "Consider it the cost of clarity." Over the next 72 hours, I received 6 emails and 4 texts from cousins, in-laws, even an old family friend who was at the dinner. I wanted to say something, but I didn't know how. "You were always the one they leaned on, Em. It wasn't fair. The way they treated you. Everyone noticed. We were just too afraid to rock the boat." And there it was. That boat I had kept afloat with my silence. It was finally sinking. But not with me in it. I had found a lifeboat called No More. 2 weeks after the dinner, I received a frantic voicemail from Vanessa. "Emily, I need you to call me. It's urgent. My car won't start. I was gonna use the joint fund for the repair, but it's gone? What happened?" I didn't respond. Because we weren't joint anything anymore. She called again. And again. And on the 5th try I picked up. "Vanessa. Thank God. Em, I don't know what you're trying to prove, but this isn't funny. My mechanic won't release the car until I pay." "Then pay." "I don't have it right now. I thought the joint fund. That's closed." Silence. "You can't do that. That's our account." Correction, it was our account. You didn't contribute, remember? "Oh my God, you're being so dramatic." "And you," I said evenly, "are being entitled." She sputtered something. Half apology, half insult. I didn't stay long enough to listen. "I hope the bus isn't too crowded," I said. "Take care, Vanessa." And I hung up. For the first time in our shared history, I wasn't the safety net. I was the storm. The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 weeks after being told family only, I sat at the head of a real table, my own. 6 people. None of them blood relatives. All of them chosen. No fancy chandeliers. No table cards. No designer centerpieces. Just mismatched plates, shared laughter and space. Space for all of me. No one had to earn a seat. No one was seated near the trash. As the night ended and the dishes were done, I opened my notes app and typed one more rule. Rule 5. If I have to beg for basic respect, I'm already too close to the wrong table. 3 days after my dinner party, where laughter wasn't weaponized and no one had to sit by the trash can, I received something strange in the mail. A handwritten envelope. No return address. But the slanted cursive, the slightly overcurled capital E in my name, gave it away. It was my mother's handwriting. I stared at it for a full minute before opening it. She hadn't handwritten anything to me in years. Not a card. Not a note. Not even a post-it on the fridge when I'd visit. Inside was a short letter. No rambling. No attempts at justification. Just this. "Emily, I've reread your email 5 times. I didn't know how far we had pushed you. Or how silent you had become just to stay close. I was wrong. If you never want to come back, I understand. But if you ever do, I promise not to seat you by the trash. Love." I folded the letter carefully. Not out of emotion but reverence. It was the first time in 32 years she had said, "I was wrong," without following it with, "But you." No tears fell. No lump formed in my throat. Because this time I wasn't desperate for the apology. I had already built the closure. This letter wasn't redemption. It was recognition. And sometimes that's more powerful. I didn't text her. Didn't call. Didn't post a screenshot for social media approval. I simply slid the letter into the drawer beside my journal and went on with my evening. I had just finished retelling the events. The walkout, the silence, the call from Dad, the final voicemail from Vanessa. And now she leaned forward slightly. "What do you want now, Emily?" And for the first time in a long time, I didn't know. I had spent so many years wanting to be seen, to be included, to be loved without being used, to be heard without being labeled dramatic. Now that the noise was gone, the chaos calmed. There was space. And in that space, something new began to grow. Not need. Not revenge. Just me. I booked a solo trip to Santa Fe. The same one I'd postponed twice before. Once for Dad's surgery, and once because Vanessa had a breakdown over a business deal falling through and needed moral support. This time no one stopped me. No one even noticed I was gone. Perfect. I walked the open-air art markets in linen pants, drank coffee at sunrise without makeup, and scribbled poetry into a worn leather notebook like it was 2009 again. I didn't have to explain myself. I didn't have to narrate my piece. On the third morning, sitting outside a gallery sipping dark roast and reading Adrian Rich, I got a message. From Jenna, my quiet cousin who had stayed silent at the dinner. It was a photo. Not one I took. Not one I had ever seen. But clearly from that night. The birthday dinner. Vanessa mid-toast. Dad smiling. Mom dabbing at her eyes. And in the blurred background, me. Still in my coat. Seated by the trash bin. The only one not facing the center. No one speaking to me. No one noticing I was even there. I stared at it longer than I expected to. Not because it hurt, but because it finally confirmed what I'd suspected for years. I had become a ghost in rooms I helped pay for. That night in my hotel, I opened my phone and started a new list. Things I no longer do. Cover family bills. Just until payday. Send birthday cards to people who forget mine. Drive 3 hours for guilt-based dinners. Ask to be included. Stay in rooms that ignore my voice. Act like silence doesn't hurt. Be the backup when the favorite fails. Translate passive aggression into, they still love me deep down. Say yes when I mean I'm tired. It was the longest list I had ever written. And for the first time I didn't feel guilty. Madison, I just wanted you to know. Vanessa's been spiraling. She's accusing everyone of taking your side. She cornered Claire and made her cry at brunch. She said you destroyed the family dynamic. I read it twice. Me. She didn't like the dynamic being questioned. That's not destruction. That's exposure. Madison, that's cold. Me, that's clarity. When I got home I did one last thing. I opened my old shared family folder on Google Drive, the one where I stored copies of every receipt, insurance form, and travel plan for every parent-funded event. I downloaded it all, moved it into a personal hard drive, renamed the folder, paid in full. Then I deleted the shared version. No announcement, no confrontation, no digital scream, just a quiet click. And then I exhaled. The next few weeks passed like deep breaths I didn't know I had been holding. Each morning felt lighter. Not because my life had suddenly transformed, but because I had stopped dragging people who didn't want to walk with me. No more random, just checking in messages that were really financial feelers. No more Sunday guilt calls. No more Vanessa voice notes wrapped in condescension and sugar. Silence used to scare me. Now it felt like peace. I started spending more time doing things I had long delayed. Not out of laziness, but because I had always been on call. For family. For favors. For forgiveness I wasn't sure I owed. But now I read in bed without checking the family thread. I took myself out to brunch, ordered the expensive latte, and left a generous tip. Not because someone was watching, but because I felt like being generous. To me. One night, I found myself scrolling through old emails. I didn't mean to, but a search for an old password landed me in the middle of a chain from 2 years ago. Subject: Vanessa's launch party, help? Clicked it. There it was. Her long, cheerful paragraph asking me to design her logo, create a website, and Just handle the launch logistics because you're so good at that stuff. No offer of payment. No appreciation. Just assumption. Can you also pay the caterer deposit and I'll send my half next month? She never did. I remember staying up past midnight making sure everything was perfect. And at the party, she had introduced me as my sister. She does tech stuff. Tech stuff. Not the woman who built her brand's foundation for free. Not the sister who made her look polished while being treated like background noise. Not anymore. A few days later, I received a short email from Dad. Subject: dinner next week. He wanted to meet. Just the two of us. No hidden agenda. No, your mother wants to talk. No, Vanessa says you've been distant. Just, let me take you out to dinner. I hesitated. The old me would have agreed instantly. The old me would have hoped the dinner meant healing, reconnection, maybe a soft bridge back into the family. But the new me. She asked, what's in it for your peace? I replied, yes, but not at Rose Ember. Picked a small bistro I liked. Someplace casual. No chandeliers. No white tablecloths. No waiters in suits. Just real food. Cozy table. And a quiet booth by the window. He showed up early. I recognized that as his version of trying. He was never good with words, but he knew punctuality meant something to me. We sat, ordered, talked about books for a while, then fell into silence. Then he said, Vanessa's furious with me. Why? Because I didn't side with her. I raised an eyebrow. He added, she said I'm choosing you. I almost laughed. It's not about choosing sides, Dad. It's about choosing what's right. I know. He paused. You've always been steady. The one we didn't have to worry about. That's not a compliment, I said softly. I know, he replied. It's an admission. He looked at me, really looked at me like he was finally registering the daughter behind the reliability. You were never the loudest. But you were always the one holding everything together. Not anymore, I said. He nodded. And didn't ask me to reconsider. Didn't say, we need you back. Didn't suggest I be the bridge like always. He just ate his meal, paid the bill and said, you deserve better than what we gave you. I walked home that night not feeling triumphant. Just balanced. Like something inside had shifted into place. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't waiting. I wasn't clinging to a fantasy of the family I wished I had. I was accepting the one I did. With clear eyes. And firmer boundaries. Later that night I got a message from a childhood friend. Marlene. Someone who had been at the birthday dinner but barely spoke. I've been thinking about you, she wrote. I saw everything. I didn't say anything that night and I regret it. It's okay, I replied. You didn't owe me that. Maybe not, she said. But I should have done it anyway. For me. That sentence stuck with me. I should have done it anyway. For me. How many times had I kept silent for someone else's comfort? How many times had I downplayed my pain so others wouldn't feel bad about causing it? Too many. So I started writing. Not emails. Not text threads. But real writing, stories, reflections, essays I never shared. Not to be read. But to remember who I was before I was just the dependable one. And in that quiet rediscovery, I met myself again. Not the sister. Not the fixer. Not the ATM with a soft voice. Just Emily. Days passed. Then weeks. And slowly, something strange began to happen. My phone stayed quiet and it didn't bother me. No check-ins from Mom. No sarcastic voice notes from Vanessa. Not even those dry hope all is well texts from Dad. For once, I wasn't being pulled back into the orbit I'd spent years rotating around. And guess what? I was still breathing. In fact, I was thriving. I used to think silence meant punishment. That when family stopped calling it meant they were mad. That I'd done something wrong. That I should apologize for whatever they were uncomfortable with. But now silence felt like space. And space gave me permission to choose what I allowed back in. I was no longer the emergency response team for people who never thanked me. I was no longer the emotional sponge for guilt, shame, and obligation. I had unsubscribed from the narrative. That month I started therapy sessions twice a week. I didn't go to fix myself. I went to stop gaslighting myself. To stop wondering if I was too sensitive or too cold or too much or not enough. To stop asking, was it really that bad? 'Cause yes, it was. It was bad to be seated by the trash can at your own father's birthday dinner. It was cruel to be treated like a guest when you footed the bill. It was manipulative to be used emotionally and financially and still told, "Why do you always make things about you?" So no, I wasn't overreacting. I was responding. With clarity. With choice. One evening, while journaling in my living room with a cup of mint tea, I heard a knock at the door. That was rare. No one just showed up anymore. I peeked through the peephole. It was Madison. I opened the door slowly. She looked nervous, holding a small brown bag. "Hey, I hope this isn't weird." "Only a little," I said, smiling. She handed me the bag. Inside was a bottle of wine and a note. I unfolded it. For the woman who finally said no. I looked up. I had it lying around. "I figured you'd appreciate the label," she said. I pulled the bottle out. It read, "Table turned." How fitting. We sat in my living room for over an hour. No pressure. No heavy talk. Just two women who had seen the same storm and decided to stop standing in the rain for people who refused to offer umbrellas. "Vanessa never really got over you," I said at one point. Madison laughed. "And she never really appreciated you. Welcome to the club." We toasted. Not to revenge, but to release. Later that night, I thought about the version of me that would have never opened the door. The version who would have worried. What if this makes things worse? What if Vanessa finds out? What if I'm being messy? But healing teaches you something powerful. You're not responsible for how people react to your piece. A few days later, the family group thread came alive again, out of nowhere. "Mom. Hi everyone, just a heads up. Your father's planning a small dinner next month. Nothing fancy. Just immediate family." I stared at the message. Then read it again. Immediate family. What a loaded phrase. A phrase I had learned the hard way didn't always include me. I didn't respond. I didn't ask for details. And I definitely didn't offer to make a reservation. An hour later, another ping. "Vanessa. I assume you're not coming, Emily? Not would you like to come? Not we'd love to have you." Just assumption disguised as a jab. I typed and deleted a dozen versions of a reply. Then I settled on, "Emily, you assumed right. Simple. Clean. She didn't respond. Neither did Mom. Neither did Dad. Perfect. That night, I slept without melatonin for the first time in months. Because closure doesn't always come with fanfare. Sometimes it's just peace. The kind that settles into your bones quietly. Like finally putting down a heavy bag you didn't realize you were carrying every day for years. The next weekend I hosted dinner again. Not a party this time. Just 3 friends. Some candles. Jazz playing in the background. And homemade pasta I was a little too proud of. Midway through the meal, one of my friends looked around the table and said, "You're glowing lately. Did something change?" I smiled, sipping my wine. "Yeah," I said. "I stopped sitting at tables where I'm not served." Later that night I opened my laptop. No agenda. No email to draft. Just a thought I didn't want to lose. I started typing. Some people think being left out is the worst thing that can happen to you. But being included in places where you're invisible, that's worse. That's emotional starvation in a room full of food. That's being present and still erased. So no, I'm not bitter about being excluded anymore. I'm finally full. 'Cause I feed myself now. A few mornings later, I found myself cleaning out the hallway closet. Not because it was messy, but because I needed to make space. Not just physical space, but emotional, psychological, mental. Buried behind an old box of tangled holiday lights and unused votive candles was a folded quilt I hadn't seen in years. It was my grandmother's. The one she gave me when I moved 3 states away before all of this. Before adulthood became an exercise in being quietly useful. It smelled like cedar and winter and something else I couldn't quite name. Memory, maybe. I sat down right there on the hallway floor, quilt across my lap, and let the stillness wrap around me. For a moment I was 18 again. Full of plans. Full of hope. Before being dependable became my personality. Before I traded spontaneity for stability, because someone had to be the strong one. But I was tired of strength. At least, the kind that only served everyone else. Later that day, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize at first. Hey, it's Claire. Madison's friend. We met once at that wedding in Atlanta. Blinked. Claire. We had spoken briefly once. About art, books, and a shared love of lemon bars. Claire. Just wanted to say your story. Your email. It's made its way around. Quietly, of course. But people are talking. And they're not on Vanessa's side this time. I stared at the screen. Me, what do you mean? Claire. I mean the version of the story your sister has always pushed. It's unraveling. One email cracked open decades of discomfort. Everyone knew. They just didn't know what to do with it. Till now. I didn't reply right away. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because I was calm. Vindication didn't need fireworks. Just confirmation that I wasn't crazy. That I hadn't imagined it all. That the quiet pain had been real. That people had noticed. And chose comfort over confrontation. That night I dreamt about a dinner table. Not the real one. Symbolic one. It was circular, glowing under soft warm light. Everyone at the table had a seat. No one was squeezed in, no one was pushed aside. There were no assigned places, no favorites, no forgotten names. And right in the center was a chair with my name carved into it. Not scribbled in. Not labeled with a sticky note. Carved. Permanent. I woke up with tears in my eyes. But not sad tears. Tears of arrival. Because I had finally stopped begging for someone else to carve me in. A week later, I bumped into an old colleague at the bookstore. Luna. She'd left the firm a year before I did. We had always connected on our shared love of metaphors and peppermint tea. She looked at me and tilted her head. You look different. Smiled. Good different or bad different. Peaceful different, she said. Like you stopped waiting for someone else to clap for you. I didn't even know how to respond. 'Cause she was right. I had lived for applause that never came. For recognition that stayed 2 seats away. For validation that was always conditional. But not anymore. Later that evening, I revisited something I hadn't touched in months. The shared family photo album online. It was linked to my email, but I hadn't opened it since before the birthday dinner. The latest upload was from Dad's 65th. The event that started this entire unraveling. Click. Dozens of pictures. Vanessa laughing. Mom sipping wine. Uncle Ray mid-toast. And then, one picture. Just one. Of me. Blurry. Background. Fold-out chair. Still in my coat. No smile. No drink. No caption. I stared at it for longer than I should have. And then gently I clicked remove tag. Felt symbolic. Necessary. Final. Because I wasn't in the background anymore. I wasn't their footnote. I was the headline of my own story. The next morning I opened a new Google Doc. Title. Rules for my table. Subheading. Where I decide who gets a chair. Copied over my original 4 rules. Then I started adding. Rule 5. If you only call when you need something, don't be surprised when I stop answering. Rule 6. Emotional labor is work, and I charge for repeat clients. Rule 7. If my silence is the only reason you're comfortable, that's your red flag, not my peace. I added 10 more. They weren't petty. They were precise. Because when you've spent your life being the glue, setting boundaries feels like breaking something. But you're not breaking anything. You're refusing to be used as cement. That night I took myself out to dinner. Table for 1. Window seat. I ordered what I wanted. No compromises for someone else's taste. I brought a book. I sipped slowly. And I didn't look at my phone once. When the bill came, the waiter smiled and said, Would you like change? I looked at him and smiled. No. I've already made enough of that. As I walked home under city lights, heels clicking against pavement, I felt it. Not the absence of family, but the presence of self. A self I had hidden, muted, and downplayed to fit a mold I never asked for. That night, I didn't open any texts. I didn't scroll Instagram. I just made tea, curled up with the old quilt, and exhaled. The kind of exhale that tastes like freedom. I once read that the hardest part of healing isn't the pain. It's the rewiring. Because your body, your heart, your mind, they get so used to betrayal, neglect, and conditional love they start mistaking it for normal. So when kindness finally comes, it feels foreign. When peace finally arrives, you flinch. When your phone doesn't buzz with guilt traps and passive-aggressive obligations, you wonder, is this what freedom sounds like? It is. But it takes time to believe it. One of the hardest adjustments was not explaining myself. Not justifying why I didn't respond. Why I didn't show up. Why I said no. You see, when you've spent years being agreeable, compliant, and the good one, silence feels like rebellion. But silence can also be sovereignty. And I was building a new kingdom, one where my energy wasn't the family's emergency reserve. A week later, I bumped into Aunt Julie at the grocery store. She was standing in the tea aisle, debating chamomile or mint, like the universe was daring me to engage. She saw me before I could turn away. Emily. Aunt Julie. Mole nod. Mole smile. She approached, cautiously. You look well. I am. We missed you at the follow-up dinner. There it was. I smiled, calm and unwavering. I wasn't invited. Oh, I'm sure that was just a mix-up. You know how your mother. Julie, I interrupted gently. Let's not do that. She blinked. Do what? Rewrite history while we're still standing in it. She looked away. I picked up my tea box, mint, and began to walk away. Then she said something I wasn't expecting. You were right, you know. It was cruel. What they did to you. Turned slowly. Then why didn't you say anything? Her voice lowered. Because I didn't want to be next. And that's when I knew. It wasn't just me. There were others at the table who had chosen silence because they were afraid of being exiled. But I wasn't afraid anymore. That night, I wrote in my journal, let them exile you. Better alone in truth than included in lies. A few days later, I got a message from Dad. Dad. Just saw your name pop up in an article about independent consultants. Proud of you. Always have been. Just didn't say it enough. It was short, but real. And real beats loud every time. I didn't reply immediately. Not because I was cold, but because I was learning to receive instead of rushing to perform. Later that evening I replied. Thanks, Dad. That means something. Even now. Vanessa, of course, stayed silent. Her strategy was always the same. Disappear, then re-emerge when the dust settles. Usually with a story that makes her the hero or the victim, depending on who's easier to manipulate. But this time there was no dust. Only distance. And I was no longer standing still, waiting for her to close it. A week passed. Then 2. Then 3. I launched a new service for my business. Took on 3 new clients. Booked another solo trip. This time to Portland. I was building my life like a table with custom legs. Solid, balanced, handcrafted. And guess what? Not once did I miss the old one. One evening, while organizing old folders, I found a Word doc I didn't remember writing. Titled, Apologies I'll Never Receive. It was from 3 years ago. Opened it. Inside were lines like, I'm sorry I made you the reliable one, then punished you for not being carefree. I'm sorry I called you selfish the one time you said no. I'm sorry I treated you like a favor machine. I'm sorry I only noticed your silence when it made me uncomfortable. Closed it. Then smiled. Because I no longer needed those apologies. I had given them to myself. And they held more weight that way. That weekend I had coffee with Madison again. She brought scones. I made cinnamon tea. You really did it, she said after a while. Did what? Walked away. Quietly. Fully. No dramatic meltdown. No revenge plot. Just truth. I sipped my tea. Truth doesn't need volume. Just clarity. She paused, then said something I didn't expect. You know, I think Vanessa's still spinning because you broke the unspoken contract. What contract? The one where you were supposed to stay small so she could stay shiny. That hit deep. Because for years, I had folded myself into corners to make space for her ego. I had dimmed to let her shine. I had quieted to keep the peace. But I was done being the silent sister in the background of someone else's spotlight. That night, I wrote a letter I never planned to send. Addressed to my younger self. It started like this. Dear you. I'm sorry we waited so long to choose you. But I promise we're not waiting anymore. The thing about healing is, it's not loud. It doesn't arrive with applause or fanfare. No aha moment with movie music swelling in the background. It's quiet. It's in the way your shoulders drop after years of holding intention. It's in how you pause before replying and this time you choose not to. It's in deleting the birthday reminder for someone who never remembered yours. And it's in no longer checking to see if they noticed you're gone. A few days after I wrote the letter to my younger self, I got an email notification. It was from Vanessa. I stared at it for a full minute before opening it. Subject line. You win. Short. Cold. Clip. The message read. Congrats on turning the whole family against me. I hope being the victim finally gave you what you wanted. Don't bother replying, I won't read it. I read it once. Then once more. Then I archived it. No response. No counterpoint. No invitation to another emotional ping-pong match. Because I wasn't playing anymore. A few days later, I was on a train headed to Portland. Headphones in, coat draped across my lap, notebook open. I was halfway through writing an essay titled, What They Never Told the Reliable Child. Here's how it started. They never tell you that being the dependable one means being overlooked first and blamed last. That your kindness will be used like a vending machine. Insert guilt, receive service. That your silence will be mistaken for resilience. That when you stop showing up, the world around you won't collapse, but the people who leaned on you will panic. And maybe that's the point. Not to make them suffer, but to finally see who notices when you stop holding the weight. Portland was gray and wet and strangely soothing. I stayed in a quiet Airbnb near the river. Read poetry. Drank strong coffee. Took long walks with no destination. It was my first trip in years where I didn't feel the need to check in with anyone. Not because I was running away, but because I was finally arriving. Myself. On the third day, I sat in a local bookstore cafe when my phone buzzed. Text from Dad. Just checking in. No pressure. Hope you're finding what you need. I stared at it. And instead of feeling pulled back in, I felt understood. Not because he had fixed everything, but because for once he wasn't asking me to. I replied, Thanks, Dad. Hope you're doing okay too. He sent back a simple heart emoji. And for some reason that was enough. That evening, I stood by the river as the city lights shimmered against the water. I thought about how far I had come, not in miles but in mindset. Once I would have measured growth by approval. Now I measured it by peace. I used to chase closure like it was a locked door only someone else could open. But closure, I'd learned, isn't an apology. It's not a seat at the table. It's not finally being chosen. Closure is the moment you stop waiting for any of that, and choose yourself instead. The last day in Portland, I visited an old paper store tucked between two vintage bookstores. I bought a small blank journal. On the first page I wrote, This book belongs to a woman who no longer begs for belonging. When I returned home, the city felt different. Not louder, not colder, just clearer. Like I could see the outlines of where I used to overextend. Where I used to say yes while screaming no inside. Where I used to believe loyalty meant tolerating pain. And now I saw every one of those choices for what they were. Attempts at being loved without asking for it out loud. But that chapter had ended. I didn't need to be tolerated. I deserved to be chosen. Not out of guilt but desire. A few nights later I hosted another dinner. Small, warm, no curated perfection. Just good people. One brought flowers from a farmer's market. Another made pie from scratch. Madison brought a playlist that made us all laugh and cry. Halfway through, someone raised a glass. To Emily, who doesn't just build her own table. She teaches the rest of us how to stop sitting where we're not fed. Smiled. But this time I didn't tear up. Because the girl who once would have downplayed the toast. She wasn't here anymore. Later that night, alone in the kitchen, washing dishes with the scent of lemon and cinnamon in the air, I whispered to no one in particular. I'm not lonely. I'm free. And that, I realized, was the difference. Loneliness aches for inclusion. Freedom celebrates its own company. I didn't know what would happen with my family. Maybe nothing. Maybe eventually something. But either way it would be on my terms now. No more folding chairs. No more background blur. I wasn't a footnote. I was the full story. And I hadn't even finished writing it yet. Few weeks passed. The group chat stayed mostly quiet. A few neutral updates. Uncle Ray had back surgery. Aunt Karen was redoing her kitchen. A blurry baby photo from a second cousin I barely knew. No one mentioned me. No one asked where I was. No one said my name. And you know what? That was fine. Because I was no longer in rooms where my name was only mentioned when someone needed something. I started waking up earlier. Not out of stress or obligation, but with purpose. With energy I didn't realize I'd been wasting on trying to prove my worth. I journaled every morning. Brewed my own coffee instead of rushing to Starbucks. Watered my plants. Worked with clients who respected my time. Texted friends who didn't wait for me to fall apart to finally check in. Life got simpler. Not easier. Just mine. Fully, finally, unapologetically mine. One Sunday afternoon, as I sat on my balcony with a book and sunlight pouring through the slats, I got a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it and there she was. My mother. Hair tied back. Sunglasses off. No makeup. Just her. And for the first time in maybe my whole life, she looked uncertain. "Hi," she said softly. I didn't speak. Not because I was angry, but because I was listening, for once, letting her fill the silence. "I was nearby," she continued. "And I wanted to try." I stepped aside slowly. She entered. Took in the space. The quiet. The framed art. The fresh flowers. The absence of chaos. We sat down at my dining table. The one I had bought with my own money. Set up with my own hands. The same one I now shared only with people who earned a seat. She looked around, then said, "It's beautiful here." "Thank you," I replied. Another long pause. Then finally, "I read your letter again." Waited. The one with the receipts. The breakdown. The part where you said, "I'm tired of paying for rooms that won't even offer me a chair." A line. "I haven't stopped thinking about it." He nodded. It was true. "I know," she said. "And I'm sorry I let it happen." I didn't cry. Not because I didn't feel something, but because tears weren't the goal. Truth was. She looked at me, her eyes softer than I remembered. "We failed you, Emily. Not because you weren't loved, but because we only loved you when you were useful." I swallowed hard. That sentence hit like a freight train of honesty. She took a deep breath. "I don't know how to fix that, but I want to start by sitting at your table now. If you'll have me." I leaned back in my chair, letting the moment settle. "This table has rules," I said. "Good," she replied. "I'm ready to learn them." We didn't hug. We didn't cry in each other's arms. We just sat there, in a silence that wasn't hostile or heavy. It was respectful, like something new had been planted. Maybe it would grow, maybe not. But this time the roots were honest. Later that night I opened my laptop. I clicked on the document titled, "Rules for My Table." I reread every line. Then added a final one. Rule 15, if they come back, make sure they bring humility, not hunger. Closed the file. Made tea. Lit a candle. Put on soft music. and sat down at my table, alone but never lonely. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't asking for a seat. I had built the whole damn room.